young Arete greeted her companions on the terrace of Artemis, goddess of the moon, as dawn broke across the Acropolis, high above the city of ancient Athens. Beneath the statue of Artemis, Arete and her friends chanted their hymns with Melissa, their tutor, and then Melissa instructed them in the rites of the goddess.
Each year in the month of Munikian, the 10th month of the Athenian year, when the air is sweet with blossoms of spring, the young girls of Athens make a procession in honor of the goddess. Holding our olive branches decked with wool, we sing and wend our way to the edge of the city. High on the walls overlooking the forest stands the shrine of Artemis, goddess of wild things. Inside the shrine, we each light a candle and form a large circle in honor of Artemis, the bringer of moonlight. The circle stands for the orb of the moon, which passes through many phases, from dark to bright, measuring the month with changing light and the ever-turning seasons which shape the years. Then we take our cakes of grain, called amphiphontes, which means shining all around, and sing a hymn of praise to Artemis, the maiden. Artemis, maiden goddess, you who protect all womankind, to you I offer this yellow cake, which shines all around, and a drink of fragrant herbs. And then comes the part we all love best. We don robes colored like the bear's thick coat to sing and dance and act the she-bear. In memory of that day, long ago, when a she-bear came to the ancient shrine of Artemis down by the sea, a bear so tame and dignified that people said it was the goddess herself in disguise. Let us sing of a brave woman, our sister Atalanta, the homeless one who was born with the soul of an athlete, filled with a love of excellence, brave determination, and striving for self-mastery. Hear now the manner of her birth, of how she was raised by a she-bear, of what she learned, and of her encounter with Prince Meleager in the hunt of the Caledonian boar. Atalanta. Atalanta's father was the king of green Arcadia, Aeacus by name, but he was displeased at her birth, for he desired a son. He told his servants,
"Take her and leave her on some mountain slope. There let chance and the howling wind be masters of her fate."
And so the servants of Aeacus took the child and sailed secretly to the neighboring land. There, on the slopes of Caledon, where her flesh and bones were cast out like refuse, her spirit awoke, wild and free. The goddess Artemis, the saver of life, keeper of the moon and the silver bow of its light, appeared over Caledon that night, and seeing Atalanta, kissed her with the cool night air, and filled her eyes with the far-seeing stars. It must have been Artemis who charmed the child's life, for a great she-bear soon came sniffing among the rocks for her lost cub, but no harm came to Atalanta. Instead, the she-bear gently took the infant to her cave, where she nursed it kindly as one of her own. And some say the she-bear was Artemis herself, uniting the girl's life with the way of the bears, which sleep for days at a time in the season when food is scarce, when the pulse of their blood and breath grows faint and drops almost to the door of death. But when the girl awoke, whether from the sleep of one night or of days on end, and made her way into the sun, to gather and eat cresses and berries and nuts, the wind would be soft on her cheeks, and she would hear it blowing among the trees. Then the blood in her veins would rush like rivulets down a mountain, and she would feel her breath quicken, and suddenly, in a rush of excitement, without a thought, she would be running. Panting with the rhythm of her stride, she would spring along hidden paths in the forest, denied human eyes, dash through meadows with the birds in chase, or leap from crag to crag. Finally, the girl would rest, patient and still, like the snake. From every wild creature, Atalanta learned some new lesson, and mastered all the skills the forest creatures possess, but still she knew nothing of human ways and customs. Then it was that Artemis appeared again to Atalanta in a dream, as goddesses do, and said, "Soon you will meet your own kind. At that time, these things will prove useful." Thus did Atalanta learn to clothe herself in the skins of dead animals, to make tools of bronze, and to fashion bow, arrows, and spear. Then Artemis said, "I have taught you of weapons, but I have not yet told you that you must be swifter than arrows. This marvelous speed will be yours when you conquer panic and fear, and never act from vengeance or hatred, but keep your heart always calm, even in the midst of battle. Let unswerving courage be your shield, and your pure, clear mind be your spear, and your thoughts will cast no shadows on your actions. Then I will make you a demi-goddess, more than mortal, bright-eyed and skilled in seeing, able, in fact, to see an arrow as it flies." Not far from the forest where young Atalanta slept, another youth slept in the robes of a prince. His name was Meleager, second son of Enus, king of Calydon. The king had killed his first son in a fit of rage, and so Meleager's mother, Althea, sought to charm his life against all harm. It was said that when Meleager was but a few days old, she had heard the Miri themselves whispering at his crib, the Miri who are the phases of life. There is one who spins the fragile thread of life and sings of times gone by, and one who pulls the thread of life along and sings of all that is, and one who cuts the thread with her shears, singing of what must be, and she is called Atropos, the unturning, for she cannot be turned away. And Althea, hearing their whispers, implored, "How can I keep my son's life safe from harm?" Then Atropos answered, "His life shall last only as long as that log which burns, even now, upon your hearth." Althea rushed to the hearth, snatched up the log, and snuffed out the flames. She hid it deep in the bottom of an old chest, among her most precious possessions. Thus protected, Meleager grew to be a skillful hunter and triumphant warrior. Althea was proud to hear people say, "This is Althea's son. She raised him well, and her labor was not in vain." One year at harvest time, when Meleager had reached manhood, his father, King Enus, forgot to offer the first fruits of the season to the goddess Artemis. Offended, she sent a huge and savage boar to ravage the crops and cattle of King Enus, to destroy his barns and fields, and chase away anyone who would work for him. Enus quickly dispatched heralds, inviting all the bravest fighters of Greece to come and hunt the boar. And he promised that whoever killed it would possess its awesome pelt and tusks. And so the hunters came to his fortress, and he gave them a feast that was 9 days long to win their loyalty. But none of them knew it was the goddess Artemis herself they were prepared to fight. On the 8th day of feasting, Meleager grew tired of it all and went to the forest, eager to track the boar. But the creature he found there was far more wondrous. As Atalanta ran through the woods, she heard the whine of an arrow as it cut towards her through the air. Quickly she dodged it and spun around to see from whence it sprang, and there was Meleager, frozen in wide-eyed wonder, like a dead man on his feet, unable to believe that the swift creature before him might be human and a woman. She took his bow from him and would not return it, but otherwise she was not angered. She showed him the lore of the forest. But if he wanted to kill a deer or any animal, she stopped him sternly, for she knew more of their ways than of his. Then Meleager led her out of the forest and showed her the destruction wrought by the boar. and so moved with concern for Enos and his people was she, that she gave into Meleager's urging and agreed to guide him to its lair. The next day, all were struck dumb with wonder at the very sight of Atalanta, and even more so at her abilities. All but Althea. She was afraid of losing her son to a life she could not foresee. She told her brothers, Plexippus and Toxus, of her fears, and kindled their growing jealousy of the brave young maid. The next morning they vowed to Meleager they would not hunt with a woman, and he would have struck them down then and there, but suddenly the savage cry of the giant boar split their ears, rang in the roof beams, and shook the surrounding hills. Astonished by the size of the beast that thundered from the forest, the hunters all scattered and fled, all but one, Atalanta, who watched in sorrow as the boar struck and wounded her new friends. But swiftly, as the boar wheeled around and disappeared again into the forest, she flew into action, while the others, shamed by her bravery, followed soon after. They came upon it in a marsh, and there great Theseus challenged it with his spear. But the godlike creature charged and caught two hunters, Onseus and Eurytion, on its razor-sharp tusks, flinging them high overhead in the air. There, as they fell to their deaths, like somersaulting acrobats, the great beast bellowed and shook the earth, spun around and disappeared again deep into the trackless wilderness. No one chased it now, but Atalanta, spurred on by pride, with a speed and a fierceness she had never known, to match the terrible challenge of the beast. Now, for the first time, she tasted the urge to kill and conquer that catches fire in human hearts. Outrun by the matchless Atalanta, the boar raced back with steaming breath and charged huge Telamon, who tripped on the root of a tree. Then it might well have killed him and all of his companions, but Atalanta let fly an arrow as she ran, which lodged behind the great boar's ear, and the beast spun around in a fit of rage. Now Meleager's uncles saw their chance to satisfy their raging envy and their sister Althea's fear, so they let their arrows fly, aiming not for the boar, but instead for Atalanta's heart. But she heard the arrows as they flew, and dodged them all, even as the boar charged down upon her. Just then, swift Meleager came, dove headlong at the rearing beast, and riding it as a strong swimmer rides a great wave, thrust his hand spear deep beneath the creature's shoulder blade to find its heart and take its life. The hide of the boar was still hot and soaked with sweat as Meleager flayed it and held up the pelt to Atalanta. "You drew first blood," he said, "and had I left the beast alone, it soon would have fallen beneath your spear. This trophy belongs to you." But Atalanta was somber and silent. The heat of the chase was melting from her brow, and she saw the life draining from the great creature which lay before her. She knew then that she had killed a messenger of the goddess. Suddenly Meleager's two uncles shouted out, "Why should this wild woman claim what is ours? By laws of honor, the pelt should go to the closest kin of Enos. After you, we are next in line." Now quickly Meleager's temper flared, and letting his love for Atalanta turn to rage, he drew his sword and said, "Will your insults to this daring woman never cease? Then to Hades you can go, along with your quibbling hearts." Althea stood at her window, motionless, while the bodies of her brothers were being carried home, and flames of unquenchable rage began to flicker deep in her heart. Then all at once she went mad, and rushing to her chamber, she dashed to the chest where lay the half-burned log that had charmed Meleager's life these many years. Covered with dust it lay, a year of dust for every year of Meleager's life. Driven thoughtless by frenzy, she snatched out the log and ran to the hearth, where she cast it upon the smoldering embers. She knelt and coaxed the flames to life with her own breath. and she could hear Meleager cry out nearby, as pain scorched his heart, and the life in him ebbed as surely as the flames devoured the log. Then she knew that Atropos had cut the thread of his life, and mad with grief at her deed, she staggered into the great empty hall where the warriors had feasted. There she took her own life. Atalanta, sad to discover that creatures of her own kind kill their brothers and themselves, went her way, returning to the wilderness which had raised her.
The tale was over, and the girls were filled with wonder. Now many questions came to mind. Was it a tale of triumph or a tale of woe, Melissa told? Each girl answered, and then Melissa too.
It is both, but for Althea, only woe. She wanted too much, and her ambition made her blind. She lost her way in quarrels and jealousy, which only brought disaster. But Atalanta had a warrior's heart. She prized her own skills above all else, and they served her well in the end, for she became her own master. She did not quarrel. She dodged every arrow, and no harm could find her. Mistress of moors and stars, sisters of meadows and plains, in green holy places the long sun shines, and bees wing alone where flocks never graze, nor waving grass is ever mown by the wild dark woods far